Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, if you're not satisfied with your love or sex life, I want you to know that I get how painful it is. Sometimes it's hard to know what to do to change things up and get the results you want. But having spent 20 years as a dating and relationship coach, supporting thousands of men to have the relationships and sex they want, I know it's possible for you when you get the right kind of support. As a woman coach, I bring a unique advantage by helping you understand how women think and feel and why they say and do things that can be so frustrating for you. My specialty is being able to tell within minutes why you're losing attraction, trust, or respect from women, and how to turn that around. Even though you've likely been raised to think you should be a man who doesn't need any help, it just doesn't work that way because none of us were handed a guide to love or sex. So every month by application, I open my calendar to a few men for consultations. Men are amazed to walk away from these sessions feeling more confident in and out of the bedroom. Coaching isn't for everyone. I work with men who are willing to be honest about their role in the situations they've created. So if you're still playing the blame game, this isn't for you. But if you're ready to take action and have a love and sex life you feel great about, book a time to meet with me. Go to shanajamescoaching.com/consult and fill out the form to tell me more about you so we can set something up. That's shanajamescoaching.com/consult. Enjoy today's podcast. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I feel excited and inspired today to have a guest who I admire and just really appreciate her work in the world. So Dr. Susan Campbell, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. And today we're going to talk about anger because I know anger is one of those things that, we all feel it. We all experience it, though I will, we can get into this more later. I didn't know I ever got angry until I was in my mid-20s because I just was in denial of that. But it can be one of those forces that can be destructive in a relationship. And as I work with men, a lot of men have a sense of duty to not express their anger because they don't want to hurt people. They're afraid of what might happen when they express their anger. And yet in not expressing anger, we all know that some pretty unhealthy things can happen as well. So thank you so much for being willing to talk about this.
Yeah, and there, of course, there's healthy expression and not so healthy expression,
Exactly.
which is what we will be getting into. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Great. So do you want to start with that or do you want to start with why people get angry?
Well, let's talk generally about why people get angry. What function does it serve for
Okay.
humans?
Great.
So, in a way, there's like three different ways of seeing anger. First, it can be an instinctual survival reaction,
Okay.
like in fight, flight, freeze. And that is so instinctual you don't have much of a choice, but it's a way to communicate, I don't like this, I don't want this, or get away from me. It can be a boundary kind of thing, or it can
Yeah.
be a push away.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a necessary survival instinct
Yeah.
when you're in a survival situation.
Yeah.
Okay, so talk more about how our human personalities get real survival confused with survival to my ego's sense of safety, which
Right.
is not to be minimized. But okay, so there's the instinctual kind of anger
Mm-hmm.
that's just like, no. Um, then there's sometimes something happens that violates your values.
Uh-huh.
Like you catch a person lying, or in the news, anger at Putin or Netanyahu for doing things that are so against your values.
Yeah.
So anger is also a reaction, but
Yeah.
less instinctual here, but it's still kind of a threat to you
Yeah.
because we lived in a world where everybody lied,
Yeah.
or went to war when they didn't, get their way.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of a necessary function of anger. And then the other one is much more conscious anger. It's like strategic anger.
Mm,
Maybe you're in a negotiation, uh, and you want to get the upper hand, so you make yourself big and you make yourself seem more threatening
uh-huh.
than you probably ordinarily would be in your daily life. So it can be that kind of a strategy, but there can be
Interesting.
a good way of strategically using anger too. Like if you're in a marriage or in a relationship where your partner continually violates a boundary, like
Mm-hmm,
spending
mm-hmm.
way more money than you guys have or something like that.
Or
Sometimes you,
nags or, diminishes you
yeah,
or, right. Yeah. Talks to
right.
you a certain way or, yeah.
Stuff that you want to call attention to. So
Yes.
this would be strategic anger in a healthy way, like this is not working for me, and here's going to be some consequences if this doesn't change.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
And would you say, because I'd imagine there would still be an instinctual sense of anger there, but but how you're speaking it or how you're navigating it seems more conscious.
Yeah, you might start out with the instinctual, and then once you've processed it a little bit more so that you can talk and be heard,
Right.
using your words in a more effective way,
Then it
and
becomes more
it
strategic
becomes
or conscious.
strategic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I've tried blowing up, I've tried being nice and kind of reasonable. None of that stuff worked.
Yep.
So now I'm going to just hit it hard to get the person's attention and to let them know this is really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
A
I
lot of us can't,
remember
a lot
I
of us
rem
cannot do that, you
No, I
know.
mean it's challenging. I actually remember years ago when I was married and my partner got mad at me for something and he it was pretty straight on, like he was pissed, but there was something about it that actually opened my heart and it was shocking. Like I thought I was gonna crumble because I usually crumble when people bring anger toward me, but instead I actually had this feeling of delight and it was like think it was I somewhere inside of me I felt how he was truly standing up for himself and he wasn't shaming or attacking me. It was just this pure expression of anger.
Mhm.
But that's not normally how it goes, right? Especially in relationships when we're expressing anger with each other. There's a lot of pain that can happen.
Well, and that's when the instinctual form of anger, and in my work, I call it getting triggered,
Okay, yeah.
getting buttons pushed. And that's like, your fear of abandonment gets pushed because your partner chooses to go out with his friends instead of stay home with you,
Yeah.
and you get angry about that, but it's for made up reasons. I mean, you will survive if he goes out without you, but
Yeah.
it's reminiscent of unmet childhood needs
Right.
that are causing you to be very vigilant in the present
Yeah.
about pain that happened too much for your little nervous system
Right.
when you were a child.
Yeah.
So anger is a doorway. This kind of, reactive anger can be a doorway into what's unhealed in me and what do I really need to express to my partner about him going out with his buddies every Thursday night. Whoa, it brings up feelings that I'm not wanted, that I'm not valued, and I need some reassurance
Yes.
uh, about that.
Yeah.
Or I need some truth, some dialogue about it.
It's such a
So
great example of
anger
how
can be a
those life,
doorway to
yeah.
more intimacy, actually.
Yes. Yes. Okay, I love that. So anger actually can be a doorway to more intimacy. And when we use these concrete life situations where, okay, I'm getting triggered about something, like you said, it's actually reminiscent of a childhood experience. And if we hold it that way, oh, what's
Yeah.
happening for me here instead of just blaming, attacking, shaming someone else, we actually get to grow and we get to have more intimacy and we get to learn to love better.
Yeah. There's a way to work with your triggers that leads to intimacy. And then there's all the normal ways that people work with their triggers that are
It does not.
destructive
Yeah.
because they lead to these vicious reactive cycles. You're not capable of intimacy. Get off my back,
Yes.
these so if we see ourselves in one of those reactive cycles, we need to pause and go, wait, there's deeper feelings underneath here. So, I call it trigger work.
Yeah.
You need to be able to recognize your trigger, take responsibility for the fact that, oh, I'm reacting to something you did, but you just set off something that was already in me,
Yes.
some unhealed pain that I actually need to process more deeply and
Yeah.
feel tenderness and empathy and compassion for myself,
Yeah.
as well as getting some of that from you, but I can't get it from you while I'm blaming you.
Right. Right.
So, there's the whole thing about trigger work, which, you know, we can get back to
We can
that
get back to it. Okay. Okay.
So because we're still talking about anger here,
Yeah.
but trigger work requires some self-awareness and self-discipline.
Yes, for sure. Okay.
Oh, and we should just, in case we don't get back to it, there's a book
Great. Tell us the book that you wrote.
by me
Yes.
called From Triggered to Tranquil.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, you can keep peppering in your books because I know you've written about a lot of this and they've been really helpful for me and so many people.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So why people get angry, right? There's the instinctual anger. There are ways that we can be more conscious with it, but it is this innate arising of, this energetic feeling when our boundaries get crossed or when we feel upset about something. It's a natural thing that happens to people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's a force to be reckoned with, so we can learn to harness it for good.
Yes. Ooh, that's very well said. Okay. And then you want to go into a little bit more about that healthy versus unhealthy, or is there somewhere else you want to go with that?
Well, I would say one purpose for anger that's healthy is to mark your boundaries.
Mm,
You've
yeah.
you don't have to start with anger. I mean, marking boundaries ought to be something that we all naturally do
Yeah.
and expect, if you're securely attached person, which, that all got interrupted a lot for a lot of us in
Yes.
childhood.
Yeah.
Um, but a secure person just says, here's what doesn't work for me. Please stop doing that. How's that work for you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's often a step that's skipped because we haven't learned to just be normally
Right.
assertive and expect goodwill from people. We've kind of got this expectation, again, based on unmet childhood needs,
Yes.
that the world isn't necessarily so friendly to our needs.
Yeah.
So instead of expressing that doesn't work for me, the frustration builds up and the hurt builds up, and then pretty soon you blow up in anger. But anyway, even if you blow up, at least you're getting the information out on the table
Yeah.
and you can clean it up. It's
Yeah.
not like don't ever blow up. That's better than holding it in forever,
Yes.
because then you can get it out, but you must clean it up.
Yeah.
You can't just leave hurtful things
Dead
that were said,
bodies all around. Yeah.
dead bodies. No, you don't want that.
No. No.
Yeah,
No,
so
that really
healthy
breaks the trust.
to mark boundaries.
Yeah.
It's healthy to mark boundaries, and it can be healthy when it's kind of a strategic thing. You're a parent and your child is careless about their physical well-being. They
Yeah.
run in front of cars, or you're afraid they will because of the way they behave without
Yeah.
like being what they're doing. And sometimes you have to kind of sit them down and be angry. Not again, don't
Intense.
blow up at your children.
Right.
That just garbles their nervous system. But or again, if you do, you got to clean it up and
Right.
hug
Right.
them. I mean, my father had an anger issue, but he always
You
apologized.
did? Oh, that's beautiful.
Oh, sweet. He would come up to my room later. And, this is between ages like 6 and 11.
Wow.
I'm a that age kid
Yeah.
who was experimenting, getting into trouble and doing stuff, nothing horrible. But he would blow up and he'd say, I'm so sorry I got
Mm.
my temper got the best of me. He called it his
His
temper.
temper.
So, I mean, for any of you parents out there, if you can like have a word for it,
Yeah.
helps the child understand, oh, that's just my daddy's temper.
Yes.
That's
It's
not
not that my
me.
daddy doesn't love me or
Yeah, yeah,
something's wrong with me.
that meant so much to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I often talk about that with parents, right? It's not that they need us to be perfect, but if we don't clean it up, then they start to believe that that's the reality, right? That our anger or our whatever we throw on them, which we do
yeah,
unknowingly.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and that creates us adults who still are working on
Right.
handling anger in our adult relationships, and that's all fine. I mean, what's life for anyway? It's not for just smooth sailing, it's things happen and you deal with them and you
Yeah.
learn,
Yeah.
you get
Yeah.
better.
The school of life.
The school of life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I guess we're talking about healthy
Healthy
anger.
anger.
So I'm so it's boundaries and also like to get something across to somebody in a
Yeah.
strategic way that this is really important. And you might have to use a harsher tone of voice for
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
like as a parent, but also in a relationship, like,
Yeah.
stop spending so much money or there are going to be some other consequences.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. So, right. And, oftentimes people say to me, I don't want to be angry because, I think anger is destructive. And then, like you're saying, I often talk about, okay, well, there's healthy expression of anger and unhealthy expression of anger. And I remember at one point in my processing of anger, I had to separate. There was like, for me, there was mom anger because my mom, is very intense. And when her anger comes, it just kind of decimates things. And then there was like, I think I maybe separated it as warrior anger or right when there's a cause or something to stand for that's
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
conscious in that way.
Yeah, I like that warrior anger.
Hmm.
And we need to know when to bring that warrior out. In tennis, when I would always play tennis, I want to mobilize that warrior in me. I'd call it revving up my testosterone. So
I
that,
love that.
women have testosterone too,
Yep.
and it's
Yep.
it's a good thing for certain purposes. So that's just an aside. But I did want to say one more thing about
Yes,
healthy
please.
anger
Great.
because I see a number of couples over the years where their sex life has completely shut down
Yep.
and emotional connection is shut down. They're like brother
Hmm.
and sister. I mean, some of us know that place from
Yeah.
our own experience or friends.
Yep.
And they'll come in, oh no, we get along great. We never had anger, actually. They'll say stuff like that. And it takes a while sometimes,
Yeah.
but sometimes when they can realize that they're really angry for something actually kind of stupid, or they
Right.
see, because these are smart people usually,
Yeah.
people who kind of shut down. They've overthought it, maybe. Oh, it's not going to go well, that sort of thing. But when they can just let it rip with each other, sometimes a whole bunch of excitement
Passion comes back.
mobilized
Yes.
and they feel fired up in the bedroom again.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah,
think about
right. I've heard it
your
said
sex
that
life
there's
and
one. Yeah. Yeah. I've heard it said that there's one dial. And like if you turn down the dial on
mm,
any of these emotions, then the other ones kind of get taken down with it, which makes sense. Because to me, anger in a healthy way is also passion and clarity and creativity and like a, directedness. There's this kind of red um energy and aliveness to it. And so,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it's like that mobilizing aggression that I was. Sometimes you have to mobilize aggression to tackle a dance routine that you're going to do on stage.
right.
Something creative. So yeah, so there.
Great. Okay. Anything else in the distinction between the healthy and unhealthy?
Well, unhealthy would always be once things like blaming would be the most uh obvious and most
Hmm.
common.
Hmm.
Blaming is I'm pretty sure something almost everybody has done, and even if
Oh,
you're
I've
a
never know.
reasonable person, I would sometimes joke with a partner, I'm heard about this that you did. And I'm kind of blaming you here too. Just
Well,
kind
how
of
powerful too to be
have a
able to
witness
witness.
going.
Yes,
Yeah,
right. And to be able to say that, okay, I notice I'm blaming you and I don't want to commit to blaming you, but I'm a little stuck in the blaming you. I'm trying to get out of blaming you. What can we talk about this?
that's right. It's
Yeah.
so the more we work on our own self-awareness, the more we're developing that witness so that we notice our patterns and
Yeah.
notice if I'm in a reactive cycle with my partner where I'm the pursuer and he's shutting down, and the more he shuts down, the more I pursue, anything like that.
Yeah.
Um, there's anger in there, or there's energy in there that's it's really fear. Underneath
Mm.
the there's almost always one of these
Oh, wow.
core fears, like fear of being controlled,
Yeah.
fear of being abandoned, rejected, and so forth. And
Yeah.
those are all part of the trigger work curriculum that I teach. Is okay, what is that core fear that I'm getting in touch with when I calm myself down enough to actually go back to the memory of the situation that angered me,
Yeah.
to hold a more self-supporting space. Usually you have to learn some breath practices, some self-regulation,
Yeah.
like breathing or something
Yeah.
that calms down enough to bring forth the witness
Yeah.
that can then be your guide in a sense. Okay,
Mm.
what are we feeling? What are we needing? I'm with you here. It's almost like you develop an intimate relationship with
With
yourself,
yourself. Yeah. Yeah.
support you to get through these tough times and find the language to speak to your partner if
Mm.
there's a partner
Yeah.
involved.
Yeah.
The
Beautiful.
language usually underneath anger is the fear, and the fear is really needing reassurance and
Mhm.
hugs and what we call co-regulation. There's self-regulation,
Yes.
soothing myself, and there's co-regulation, which is like, I need a hug or I need some reassurance. I blew up at you out of that fear that I don't matter to you,
Uh-huh.
and that my
Uh-huh.
voice doesn't matter, my needs don't matter. That's one of the most common
Triggers.
trigger reactions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people can behave in an angry way, or they can behave in a shut down way.
Right. I
When
mean, so fascinating to realize. I think through the work that I've done in workshops, especially with men, where I've gotten to see behind, the masks and the facades, it's so clear to me that all humans, have these fears underneath the surface. And so now knowing that I can relate to people with more compassion or kind of like looking for, okay, what's under there
mm,
instead of judging people for what's on the surface, right? And what you're saying reminds me, okay, if we can actually do that in relationship and we can look at our partner and say, wow, you're really angry right now. I'm wondering what's under there. But, right, so often their triggers play into our triggers, and then we're in that cycle, like you said. Not easy to do.
but once you've gone through the trigger work together and
Yeah.
confessed your core fears to each other a number of times, because it's like it's hard to remember this stuff. So you
Yeah.
have to kind
We conveniently forget.
of have the same pile of shit over and over. And then pretty soon you go, oh,
Oh,
my partner's, acting unfriendly. That's his fear that I won't accept him.
right.
No, that his fear of being bad or wrong. That's what a lot of, you mentioned men kind of suppressing their anger
Yeah.
because they've been told they're bad or wrong.
Yeah.
And so now it's underexpressed.
Hmm.
When maybe when they were a teenager, it was a more of a unconscious reaction.
Right. Right. And then learning, right? Okay. To be conscious doesn't mean we just stuff it. It means we find healthy ways to actually express it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And just to finish off that thing about
Yeah.
partners, uh, don't believe if you kind of get uh, a handle on what your partner's trigger reaction is about. Remember, don't believe the words that were said
Right.
when they were triggered.
Yeah.
And it's a sad thing. People do say, uh, angry, hurtful things sometimes when they're triggered and they're not in their right mind,
Yeah.
or they're in that instinctive survival, I'm a cornered animal kind of a mentality.
Yes.
And of course, we don't want a partner who can't get themselves out of that
Yeah.
trigger place. That's a responsibility for each of us humans to learn
Yeah.
how to get ourselves out of that. But and sometimes you might have to go to a third party for help for learning to do that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, if you can't afford that, read my books.
Right. Right. Definitely read Susan's books. I mean, I was just thinking about that too. Okay, so it's not easy to necessarily to not believe the words someone speaks when they're triggered, right? I mean, I think that's one of the hardest things, and I've had things that have stuck with me for years and decades of like, oh, but I think, and I'm curious about what you think. Okay, then it becomes my trigger work to do. There's
Yeah.
something I'm believing about myself, or, I don't have in myself.
Yes. And it's kind of a new concept
Yeah.
about this whole people are triggered and they're not in their prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that can be reasonable and see the reality as it is,
Yeah.
more or less. They're in this narrow part of the brain that's just focused on what's bad out there.
Yeah.
So we didn't understand the brain science behind trigger reactions until maybe the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
And it's still trickling into mainstream society. So um, let's not be too hard on ourselves for not understanding. Don't believe that partner's mean side.
Right.
Mean side is just they're not feeling safe and they're like behaving like a cornered animal. And as soon
Yeah.
as you both one thing you can learn to do, though, is have a pause agreement, or at least say to yourself, I need to pause. I'm feeling overwhelmed.
Yes.
And if they don't pause, you go to the bathroom or go somewhere where
Right.
you're safe
Yeah.
so you can calm yourself, because we can't get back to being sane until we recognize we're behaving in an insane way, calm ourselves down to feel safer, and then we can come back and communicate.
Yes. And do you have any tips for, right? Like, I said some of those things for me have stuck with me for years, but in the moment, if we get stuck in believing what that person says, what do you suggest for that?
Um, Start by creating a relaxed, open, curious space inside yourself. This is called inquiry. And I call it the compassionate self-inquiry
I love
process.
that. Yeah.
Relax. I'm going to bring in a painful memory now. Okay, now I'm bringing in. So once you're resourced and you feel like you've kind of more space inside, because opening up the breath and relaxing the body actually makes you a more spacious presence that can hold more intensity.
Yeah.
People don't realize that, but try it.
Yeah.
And so then you bring in the memory of your partner saying that, even though logically no, you shouldn't believe that. It was so painful. So you just bring it in and you feel some of the pain. You just let that person who was you in your 30s, let's say, um, feeling it, holding it with tenderness, as if it's like your inner child or your inner tender part, and sit with it. It's just like you sit with a crying child on your lap for a while and just
Yeah.
be with it.
Yeah.
What that does is it helps you integrate the experience that this really did happen. It really
Mhm.
was hurtful. And I really can kind of learn with repeated doses of this practice, I can learn to bear the pain of
Mm.
that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because that stuff will happen in life. People will be unconscious toward us
Right.
and it will be hurtful. And you learn to kind of ride the waves of misfortune and good fortune that life brings. So
Yeah.
so this is the practice basically.
Yeah. And in that moment when it's happening, I imagine you could do a smaller version of that, or right, maybe you need to
Yeah.
pause so that you can
Yeah, if they're really,
actually,
if they're being mean to you in that moment,
yeah,
you want to start by taking a pause so that
yeah,
you can feel inwardly safe,
yeah,
because the external situation is not going to feel safe unless the two of you have a prior pause agreement.
uh-huh,
And when you say, this is what I recommend for conscious couples,
hmm,
even if you just, known each other for 6 months, you can still do these practices.
yeah,
Have an agreement that if I say pause, we'll both stop talking. And we know that's for the good of us
yes,
as a whole. We're no, it takes us out of the adversary positions and go, oh, pause means we need to regulate ourselves so that we can feel our we-ness again,
yes, yes,
so that you're not the enemy anymore. Because when you're triggered, whoever's out there is your
is the
enemy.
enemy. Yeah, yeah. Okay, this is great. This is so useful. Um, what comes next? So now there's a sense of, why we get angry, healthy versus unhealthy. Where do you go next with people?
Well, maybe just to top it off with, what can I learn about myself? And we've said a lot of this already, so this
Yeah,
can be like a summary. What can I learn about myself based on seeing what I get angry about, or
yeah.
based on awareness of anger? And I mentioned I had an angry father. You mentioned you had an angry mother. Uh, what can I learn about myself when I just look at my own reactions over time? Like when
Hmm.
I was a teenager, if somebody would get angry at me, I I would expect them to apologize. I mean,
Mm,
my boyfriend he would just pop off in anger. It wasn't even that hurtful because it seemed stupid, but I would expect him to apologize like my father did. And he had no education in that kind of thing. So, I mean, sometimes what I learn from how I manage anger is my childhood conditioning. Just,
mhm.
oh, that is maybe not a completely realistic expectation.
Yeah.
I'm carrying that over from my own childhood. And you probably learned something about, being around anger is not safe. So
Right.
I'm not gonna do anything that's gonna create anger in my world,
Yes, right. I didn't have the apologizing. So for me, right, anger was not safe and I wasn't get, and then I tried to make up for it by being the super nice one and not getting angry. Um, yeah, just thinking about what you said too, right? Maybe it's not maybe you can't expect that everyone would apologize like your dad did, but you
Mm.
can also have that as a value, right? Or something that you would
Yeah.
ask of people.
Yeah. I finally learned that if I have that as a value, but not as an expectation, then
It's
I don't get
different.
so righteous and uppity about
Right.
it. And
Right, right, right.
that was something I did with my father too. And I confess that in the book Getting Real, that one of my strategies, even as a child, for dealing with my father's anger was to judge him, to
Mm-hmm.
say that was a stupid thing. I'm in my little, smart kid mind. That
Yeah.
was a stupid thing to get angry about. But see, what I learned then is to get on top of my feelings with logic
Ah.
rather than to feel, which is, I'm really afraid.
Mm.
I never was authentic enough as a kid. I mean, maybe who is, and I
Right.
don't
Who
expect
is to
it.
be able to
But
say,
to
I'm
say,
afraid.
Daddy, your anger scares me.
Yeah.
If I was a really totally secure, authentic child, I would have said, Daddy, your anger scares me.
Right.
No,
Right.
but I couldn't say that. I can
No.
now and help my inner child grow up.
Right. And to be able to do that in our current relationships and say, wow, I notice that scares me, but that
Yeah.
takes having that inner resource to feel
Yeah.
safe enough. Yeah.
So how we deal with anger in our lives can teach us something about unmet childhood needs, and we
Hmm.
talked a lot about that, what your trigger reactions are based on,
Yeah.
fear of not being valued, or not being your needs not being important. Um, So those are the two good self-awareness purposes once you learn how to process anger, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Yeah. And I think that, takes it far beyond where many people go because many people just get stuck in those cycles or stuck in the triggers or, like you said, feeling righteous. Well, if you get angry, then I have a right to be angry versus, okay, this is actually, it's harming our relationship. It's breaking trust. It's killing our sex life, our passion. So I love that lens of, okay, what can I learn about myself through anger instead of making it wrong or getting righteous that we deserve to feel this way.
Yeah. So let's be curious about our anger,
Mhm.
where it's coming from, what the real need is underneath that,
Yeah.
and then go about implementing our communication skills that
Yes.
we're learning all these communication skills. Well, this is the time to really use them is after you've had an insight into yourself, you've looked into yourself, you've had an insight, you come back to whoever you need to clear things up with, and you
Yeah.
say, what I discovered about myself, and this is what I think I need from you.
Mm.
Can you help me? It's not a demand, you know, you must tell me I'm the most wonderful person in the world. It's I need your help to feel my wonderfulness, or I need your help to feel that I'm important.
Yeah.
It's more like you ask.
I love that. And that it's not a demand. It's a like, actually, can you help me or would you be willing?
Mhm.
That there's that request makes it more of a team, hey, we're on the same team here, the we, as
Yeah.
opposed to me versus you. I need you to do this for me. And if not, then I'm gonna leave or, any of those things like the threats and the demands don't tend to create more of that intimacy.
Yeah. And what we're all talking about here is more intimacy,
Yeah.
more trust and closeness, and feeling like somebody else really knows you
Mm,
and that you really know yourself.
hmm.
That's the bigger goal here.
So amazing. And that you're safe, right? That you don't have to do
Mm.
that exhausting, thing of holding up some image of yourself, but actually you can be known by someone for real and be loved in that way. Oh,
Here's
I
to
love,
that.
yeah, cheers to that. I love being with you. And I love how I think because of your depth of your wisdom and the compassion and the understanding of humans, it just, you simplify things. Things make so much sense in your presence.
Good.
Yeah. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Anything else you want to add before we complete?
No, I think that was my final piece was be curious about your anger. So
Great. Great.
we'll leave
Okay.
our we'll leave
And
our listeners with that.
with that, and where to find you, how do they find all of your amazing books and courses?
SusanCampbell.com is my website, and I've got 11 books about human relationships. And so one book is specifically okay. So the book that's specifically for couples is 5 Minute Relationship Repair. And the book that's for everybody about how to manage your triggers and communicate about them is called From Triggered to Tranquil. And you can sign up for my newsletter if you go to susancampbell.com, and I offer a free monthly group coaching call on Tuesday mornings.
Oh,
So
awesome.
it's a way people can get to know me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Mm, thanks for doing this great conversation. I always love talking to you.
Thank you. I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope you enjoyed our conversation and it gave you something to consider and explore in your life. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz or text the word alive, ALIVE, to 44144 to get a sense of how you can become a better lover and leader. You'll start to see how you can be both more respected and desired in your unique and genuine way. If you don't feel as confident or as excited about life or love as you'd like to be, this quiz is a really great starting point. and will guide you toward a more passionate love life and a more inspiring and successful career. So again, text ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144, or head over to shanajamescoaching.com/quiz. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.